Hello and welcome back to A Year of Poetry with Randall Eckstein. I'm your host, Randall. I've been in the countryside for a few days over the weekend. That came about because here in China, I teach English and my students are high school students, which means that I teach in a high school, of course. High school in China is a lot different from high school in America. One example is what happened this time. In America, each teacher has their own schedule where they teach and have tests, homework, and a long-term goal that they plan out. In China, tests are once a month, and they're all on the same day. So they have 9 basic subjects that they study, including math, history, science, including biology, physics, and chemistry, English, computers, and PE, and so on. So instead of having each class having their own test whenever, they schedule them all at the same time. So they have 2 days of tests each month. Once a month, 2 solid days. We're talking from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., 2 days in a row, tests to cover these 9 subjects, including everything that they've learned for the whole month, probably retroactive to the previous months as well. So every month I get a very long holiday. I teach, my last class is on Friday, and my first class, again, is on Tuesday. But they have their test on Thursday, Friday, which means I have no classes from Tuesday to Tuesday. I don't have a class on Wednesday, so I've had 7 days off to relax, but it wasn't very relaxing. I went to the countryside, as I mentioned, and in the countryside, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no internet, there's mobile data. Plus, there's no safety net, I want to say. It's dangerous in the countryside, which meant that I had to keep my eyes on my son all the time. I want to say 24 hours a day, but of course he sleeps, so I don't have to watch him every minute when he's sleeping. But 16 hours a day, I had to have eyes on him, and that meant I couldn't write, I couldn't read much. Well, I caught a few things, as I'm going to mention in a few moments. I've only written 2 poems this week because of my harried schedule, but they are all both on the same theme, and they're both because of a book that I've read. In my classes, I like to teach knowledge, not only English, and I teach them about the Underground Railroad. I think that that's an important part of history to understand, as well as my students are coming from a country with 56 different minorities that all get along. They don't understand racism as well as we do. They don't understand what it means to have slavery or to wish for that freedom. Their thinking is, I don't want to say repressed, because it's not, but it's not broad. It's limited to what they know, which is great. I mean, I love that their country has none of this racism or history with slavery, history with subjugation. They got their own history with the Japanese, but we won't get into that. So I've been reading this book. It's a book by William Still. He collected letters that were written by slaves and slave owners and helpers along the Underground Railroad that actually show a real account of what these people went through. And the very first story was about a man named Seth Concklin. I'd like to read a little bit of that story right now so you can get an idea of what happened. Seth Concklin was a white man, Christian Samaritan, Good Samaritan. He heard about the plight of this brother who ran away from his slave owner and left his wife and 2 children in Alabama. He was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and And he volunteered to go back to Alabama for the black man who had gotten to a free state. Actually, he'd bought himself. This man Peter had bought himself. He'd saved up enough money, paid $500 to his master, and got his free papers. So nobody was coming to knock on his door to take him back. So he could live in Philadelphia freely, and nothing would be the matter. But his wife and children were not bought. They were owned by still in Alabama, and he wanted to secret them away on the Underground Railroad in any way he could to get them free. He wanted to be reunited with his family. And I just want to mention, this is not an uncommon story. It seems like every letter that comes through that book, The Underground Railroad by William Still, which you can find freely on Project Gutenberg. I encourage you to look it up. It seems every story has the same theme. The husbands run away, or they buy themselves. They lay down in the steamer in the coal room where it's burning hot, soot in their face, no air to breathe for 2 days. They box themselves up into boxes and ship themselves in a terribly cramped position for 17 hours to get to freedom. And they do this. It seems to be a common theme that it's always the men, the husbands, and then they try to go back for their wives. But I can't make any more commentary. I don't know how it was. I can't imagine leaving my wife, but I've never been in that position. I don't want to dare say something that I don't understand. So I'm going to leave it right there. But I'd like to read something that he wrote. This is Seth Conklin's words, and this is what inspired me to my poems this week. So let me pull them up. So here I've got his description of when he reached Alabama and Kentucky. Actually, this is Kentucky. Searching the country opposite Paducah, I find that the whole country 50 miles round is inhabited only by Christian wolves. It is customary, when a strange Negro is seen, for any white man to seize the Negro and convey such Negro through and out of the state of Illinois to Paducah, Kentucky, and lodge such stranger in Paducah jail, and there claim such reward as may be offered by the master. What struck me here were the words, Christian wolves. During the 4 days waiting for the important Sunday morning, I thoroughly surveyed the rocks and shoals of the river from Florence, 7 miles up, where will be my place of departure. General notice was taken of me as being a stranger, lurking around. Fortunately, there are several small grist mills within 10 miles around. No taverns here as in the north. Any planter's house entertains travelers occasionally. The bank of the river where I met Peter and Levin is 2 miles from the plantation. I have avoided saying I'm from Philadelphia. Also avoided talking about Negroes. I never talked so much about milling before. I consider most of the trouble over, till I arrive in a free state with my crew, the first week in March. Then will I have to be wiser than Christian serpents, and more cautious than doves. So Seth Concklin risked his own life to go down to Alabama to run away with this woman and 2 children. They weren't children anymore. They were older people in their 20s, 30s. He was willing to do that because of his love of people, his unwillingness to see anybody suffer. So he went down to Alabama. He made secret connections with them, let them know in some way that he was their friend, that he knew their father. They got onto a small boat in the river. They went up the river. He got them down. They traveled by steamboat. They traveled all the way to Indiana, and they were nearly safe. It was so. He wrote a letter back saying, "I'm done. I'm at the last leg of my journey," and that is the moment when the whole group was caught. They were caught by the slavers. and taken back to Alabama. But before they could reach Alabama, Seth Concklin was knocked on the head and thrown into a river to drown. And he did lose his life for these 3 people that he didn't even know. And that, to me, is very inspiring, that he would do that. Foolhardy, but inspiring. He really believed in Christian goodness. But what really struck me was the idea, the feeling throughout this story, this portion of the story, as it's describing his travels, describing him going down there. It really struck me about he is a white man that nobody should think anything else of, but he needs to be. He's one of the wolves. He's one of the wolves, and he's there. He's wearing the wolf's clothing because he's a wolf, and he's trying to rescue the sheep. And that struck me, that image. And so I wrote this, and it is really not polished. This is a rough first draft of a poem. It's the only poem that I worked on. I worked on 2. They're both very rough. But I think this one is better, the better of the 2. So this is called, so far, it is roughly titled, Seth Concklin. And as I walk amongst you, seeing the things that you see, my skin is drawn tight upon me, and you never will know who I am. I am dressed in the wolf's own clothing. I cavort and dance with you, live in the moment you are living, and breathe by the grace of God. Yes, my skin is like your skin. You'll never have suspicions. No doubt will rise as long as I lay back and do enjoy. But my life is built on Jesus, his loving, giving creed. No matter the comfort given, I can't turn away from one in need. Let never there be but one who suffers in this life, but I will rise up for him, and whatever sacrifice. There is no more to give him than I will freely give, for he is but my brother, my life even for his. So, as a rough draft, I do hope to polish it up. I'll have some more time. My wife stayed in the countryside with my son, and I came back home so I could go back to work. I have a few days where I'm free to focus more on writing, focus on reading, and getting lesson plans done and whatever else needs to be done. Well, I'm going to read this one now because we're already at 13 minutes. I would love to read you an older epic poem because I did promise that, but I'm going to save it for next week. It's a very long one. It's several pages. So maybe next week I'll just read this one poem that's an epic poem. So look forward to that next week. And until then, take care and see you again.